This is lesson 352 in Civilization to Empire, Persia, India, and China. This presentation is kind of a bridge. It's a review of Persia, and it bridges us into India and China, which we're going to look into in more detail later. Important, to make the animations work in this presentation, open it in a new window with Google Slides. Essential question, what is the difference between a river valley civilization and an empire? So we're going all the way back to our river valley civilizations in the review aspect of this presentation. So some warm-up questions. What is an empire? How are empires different from river valley civilizations? And what are the advantages of having an empire? From civilization to empire review. Keep in mind, we've learned this already, but after thousands of years of civilization in river valleys, the first large-scale empires appeared. And we studied three of these empires already, right? The Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. River valley civilizations were complex societies with advanced technologies, cities, workers, writing, and institutions. Empires were advanced societies with well-organized, centralized governments that conquered vast territory and ruled a variety of formerly independent peoples. So the major classical Eastern empires, right, we're not looking at Rome or Greece necessarily, but we've got the Persian Empire, which we've studied. We've got the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties, which we will study in India. And then we've got the Qin and Han dynasties in China. Keep in mind, Mesopotamia went from a river valley civilization to empire. Remember, Mesopotamia means between the rivers. The two rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates right there. And you can also see that green shape is the Fertile Crescent. The fertile soil and the lack of natural boundaries in Mesopotamia led to frequent invasions and conquests throughout that area. One of the most important ancient empires was the Persians, and they were centered in present-day Iran, but they covered much more than that. The Persians grew into a powerful empire under kings like Cyrus and Darius. And don't forget the 10,000 immortals. With a powerful army, the Persians controlled Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus River Valley. Persian culture. We also studied this. The Persian religion was Zoroastrianism, which viewed life as a struggle between good and evil. Persians believed in heaven and hell as consequences for how they lived their lives. Zoroastrianism influenced the views of the afterlife in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This is the Persian Empire at its height. Quick brainstorm activity. How did the Persians control such a massive empire? Well, we've already studied this. The Persians controlled their empire in a variety of ways. Persian kings were tolerant, and they allowed conquered peoples to keep their languages and religions. Rather than destroying or looting conquered cities, King Cyrus would show respect for local customs. King Darius divided the empire into 20 provinces, each ruled by a satrap, and that was the name of a local governor. Satraps were the eyes and ears of the king. They collected taxes, and they informed the king of uprisings. The Persians built a network of roads in order to collect taxes and improve communication and trade throughout the empire. We've studied all of this. And the Persians used metal coins with standardized values to help promote trade. So now we go to the Indian empires, the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties. And you can see it goes all the way back to the Indus River Valley. Remember that? After the River Valley era, India transitioned into the Mauryan Empire or Mauryan dynasty. Chandragupta Maurya became king of India in 321 BC, and he created a vast army and conquered new lands. And Chandragupta's empire controlled most of the Indian subcontinent. So Chandragupta used familiar tactics to control his empire. Like the Persians, Chandragupta divided his empire into provinces, each ruled by a local prince. In 269 BC, King Ashoka took over and expanded the Mauryan Empire to its greatest extent, and we can see that here. During his wars of expansion, Ashoka converted to Buddhism, and our next lesson will go into more detail as to why. Ashoka developed new policies of tolerance and nonviolence for his empire. And Buddhism spread as a result of Ashoka's influence. After Ashoka's death, the Mauryan Empire declined, and the Indian subcontinent splintered into separate, smaller kingdoms for over 500 years. So there was a 500-year gap in between the end of the Mauryan Empire and the beginning of the Gupta Empire. So you have a new person. We talked about Chandragupta Maurya of the Mauryan Empire, but now you've got this new person, and his name is kind of like the first name of the old person split in half, and that's his whole name, Chandragupta. So you got this earlier person, this earlier king, Chandragupta Maurya, and now you got this new king, Chandragupta. And he formed the Gupta Empire in 320 AD. So we're past year zero, and he expanded this empire. So India experienced a golden age during the Gupta Empire and became a classical empire. And they had such advances as this. Indian astronomers independently discovered that the earth was round. We knew that the Greeks had discovered that. Well, the Indian astronomers had discovered the same thing without any connection to the Greeks. And Indian mathematicians invented modern numerals, 0, pi, the decimal system. Merchants sold exotic spices and silks to people as far as to the Mediterranean world. Then you've got the Han Dynasty in China. China and the dynastic cycle. We're going to go more into this when we go into more detail about the Han Dynasty, but suffice it to say that governments in China and history in China is based around the dynastic cycle. In the dynastic cycle, one ruling family, a dynasty, gains what is called the mandate of heaven. And as long as it has that mandate of heaven, it rules China until that dynasty grows weak and is overthrown. And so you've got these phases of the dynastic cycle in China. In phase one, at the very beginning of a dynasty, a new dynasty gains power, restores order and peace, and claims to have this mandate of heaven. In other words, heaven has mandated that this new dynasty shall be in power and be strong. And so from there, this strong dynasty establishes peace and prosperity, and it is considered by all to have this mandate of heaven, not just claims, but it's considered to have it. And then in time, the dynasty declines, and it becomes corrupt. Taxes go up, power grows weaker. And then, as if heaven is speaking, and as if heaven is withdrawing its mandate, disasters such as floods, famines, peasant revolts, and invasions occur. Is heaven trying to tell us something? And so the old dynasty is seen by the people as having lost its mandate of heaven. And rebellion against that dynasty is now justified because it doesn't have that mandate anymore. And so at the end of the cycle, that dynasty is overthrown through rebellion and bloodshed, and a new dynasty emerges. And in the history of China, along China's timeline, this cycle occurs over and over. As a result, eras in China's history are named after the ruling dynasties. So during the Han Dynasty, China became a classical civilization like Persia and Rome and Greece, and the Mauryan Dynasty and the Gupta Dynasty in India. And so it's marked by its advanced government, its trade, and its technology. Han emperors built a powerful army, and they expanded into Asia to form China's first real empire. And Chinese emperors added thousands of government workers, in other words, bureaucrats, and we've talked about what a bureaucracy is, to do such things as collect taxes and enforce laws and oversee building projects. In order to gain one of those 130,000 government jobs, citizens had to pass a civil service exam. And exams were based on Confucian teachings, and we're going to go into much more detail on that. You'll have a full explanation of who Confucius was, what he believed, and what his teachings were. But for now, let's suffice it to describe Confucianism this way. Social order, harmony, and good government should be based on family, and here's a key word, relationships. Respect for parents and elders is important to an entire well-ordered society. Within your family, if you can respect your parents and your elders, and everybody does the same thing, you're going to have a well-ordered society. And third, education is important, both to the welfare of the individual and to the welfare of society. So Han China. Chinese technologies became advanced during this dynasty, especially with regard to silk and paper making. Paper made books cheaper, and it increased literacy in China. The desire for Chinese luxury goods led to the Silk Road, which connected China with Indian, Persian, and even all the way to Mediterranean societies such as the Romans. So can we identify 3 similarities and 3 differences among the Persian, Indian, and Chinese empires?